Now, this was a chance for the Prime Minister to do something different and show, some courage, some leadership, but it looks like it's going to be another 3 years of undermining Israel. Now, the Labor government has slapped its name on a declaration condemning Israel for its actions in Gaza, along with, I think it's 25 other countries. Now, as if that wasn't bad enough, Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke then had to twist the knife. Take a look at this.
We've seen too many images of children being killed, of horrific slaughter, of churches being bombed. The images that we've seen have been pretty clear that so much of this is indefensible, and as that statement referred to, aid being drip-fed in. None of this changes the fact that the hostages need to be released. Of course that needs to happen. But what we are watching on the other side of the world is indefensible.
They also always say truth is the first casualty of any war. Liberal Senator and former Ambassador Israel, Dave Sharma, has been kind enough to join us. David, what did you make of Australia putting its name to that declaration?
Look, I don't think we should have done it in blunt terms. I think if we've got concerns about how Israel is conducting itself, we should express those privately. But my view here is there is a ceasefire proposal on the table that the US has formulated, along with Qatar, along with Egypt, that Israel has agreed to, that would allow for the release of at least some of the hostages, the release of several hundred Palestinian prisoners, the full resumption of humanitarian assistance. And it's Hamas that steadfastly refuses to accept that ceasefire deal, as has been the case now over several months. So I would like to see an end to the fighting. I'm sure many people around the world would, but we need two parties to agree to that. One is Israel, the other one is Hamas, and Hamas thus far is refusing to do so.
Well, the US reaction was pretty blunt. I think they described it as disgraceful agreement. I mean, here we are again doing something completely different to what our key ally is doing. What do you think? I saw some Israeli comments about this. I mean, they just must be shaking their heads when they considered Australia, and you were there as the ambassador, as one of their great friends in the world.
Well, look, we did used to have a very close and supportive relationship. Didn't mean we agreed on everything. Sometimes we had quite blunt and frank disagreements in private. But, when it came to existential questions, Israel's right to exist, Israel's right to defend itself against terrorism, Israel's right, in this instance, to recover its hostages, we were fully supportive of them because those reflected, Australian values, Australian priorities and Australian interests. And I think the only way you can interpret, this statement, like many before it, is it's not really about changing the reality on the ground. Hamas is not listening. Israel's not listening. It's about messaging to a domestic audience here in Australia.
How do we pick apart what's reality and what's propaganda? I mean, I know that's a difficult question, but, we see media coverage from the Palestinian side and we see media coverage from the Israeli side. How does a normal person wanting to understand what exactly is going on supposed to work out what's the truth?
Look, it's very difficult, and I have a lot of contacts and experience in the region, but I struggle with that sometimes as well. I mean, you've got to remember though that all the news that's coming out of Gaza, there's no independent international journalists in there. They're either Al Jazeera or affiliated with Hamas or in some way linked to the Muslim Brotherhood movement, and they have a particular narrative or worldview that they are trying to portray and put across. And it's hard to get an outside or independent view of what's going on. I mean, by all means, the Israeli media has a different perspective, which they offer, but they don't always have people on the ground in Gaza. So I think there's no doubt that it's a difficult situation for the civilian population in Gaza right now. But, you hear different reports about the level of hardship, humanitarian suffering, how much food is going in, how many trucks are going in each day. But, I would test and prioritise and value Israeli government sources over those that are being provided, figures and facts that are being provided by Hamas Information Ministry or Health Ministry or Education Ministry.
Our fellow Senator Mehreen Farooqi staged a protest in Parliament today. She had a sign in the chamber, which she's not supposed to have. What did you make of that?
look, I thought it was infantile. I thought it was a stunt. It was undergraduate in nature, or maybe even high school in nature. It demeans... Being a senator or being an elected representative is an immense privilege. You have, a platform. You're able to give speeches. You're able to come on media shows like this. You have the opportunity to articulate your voice. But for her and to try and upstage an important occasion in Australia's democratic system, the opening address by the Governor-General, with that sort of puerile stunt, I think it's just... It shows a great disrespect for Australian institutions and Australian democratic norms. And I don't think it's not like she is denied opportunities to speak out on this issue in many other forums.
We had a large pro-Palestinian protest outside Parliament House. I guess that's to be expected. Some of the signage bordered on hate speech, as far as I could work out. They were outside Parliament House. The Greens, of course, went out there and addressed that protest. No one's saying you can't protest, but, calling and suggesting that the Prime Minister has blood on his hands is completely over the top, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I don't know if these protesters realise this, but I think, they vastly overestimate Australia's influence on developments in a conflict on the other side of the world, It doesn't matter what Anthony Albanese does or what the Australian government does. We are not single-handedly going to be able to, convince Hamas to release the hostages. All we can do is add our voice and our weight to sensible opinions. But these people who are protesting seem to think that the sole preoccupation of Australia should not be our own citizens, our own interests, our own priorities, should be to try to address a conflict, around the other side of the world with means that we just simply don't have. I find it hard to know what these protesters actually expect they will be able to achieve by this.
Just finally, on a positive note, I was pleased to see today retired Victorian Governor Linda Dessau on a podcast with my old colleague Neil Mitchell has called out the anti-Israel protests that have taken place in Melbourne, people chanting death, death to the IDF. She came out very strongly today and she said, look, after 9/11, we were very careful about what happened with our Islamic community. We don't seem to be paying the same amount of care to the Jewish community in the wake of what happened on October the 7th. That's a positive, isn't it, that someone at a senior level like Linda Dessau would come out and say that?
Well, I think, firstly, that's an excellent and highly accurate point. But yes, it's important that people who are held in high regard by the public, who are not seen as, partisan or political in any sense, who've held high office, come out and state what needs to be said, which is that we have done a terrible job as Australians collectively, institutions, governments, but also citizens, in protecting our Jewish community and making sure that they can enjoy the same rights and freedoms as other citizens do, and instead of allowing them to be victimised or scapegoated or held responsible for the actions of a foreign state.
Dave Sharma, good to catch up. Thank you very much.